In the flickering candlelight, symbols of faith and mysticism cross paths on a tattered map. Their shadows dance upon ancient paper, hinting at a tale woven from threads of both holiness and heresy. This is a story whispered through centuries, a mystery of two lives entangled by one name. In hushed tones around campfires and in the margins of illuminated manuscripts, people spoke of Cyprian. Was he the devout bishop who defied Roman idols, or the reformed sorcerer who once bowed to demons? The truth, shrouded in time and legend, is far more intriguing. Two different men, forever mistaken for one. And so our journey begins, delving into dim archives and darker folklore to unravel the dual identities of Cyprian. A journey into an age when faith met fear, and when the line between saint and sorcerer blurred like ink on parchment. Our path first leads to Carthage, the thriving North African city of the 3rd century. Here, amid marble temples and narrow streets, lives Saint Cyprianus, a respected teacher of rhetoric and a man of comfortable privilege. Carthage's sun has scarcely set on his pagan life when something remarkable happens. Cyprian witnesses the unshakable courage of Christians awaiting martyrdom. Their calm faith under persecution ignites a profound change in him. At 35, he renounces the old gods of Rome and embraces the outlawed religion of the one God. The baptismal waters wash away his former ambitions. Rising from them, Cyprian is a new man. In an astonishing turn, this recent convert's zeal and talent propel him upward. By 249 AD, only a year or so after his conversion, the community chooses him as Bishop of Carthage. Clad in simple robes, Cyprian now stands before the faithful as their shepherd. He speaks with a passion and clarity that reflects his worldly learning, yet his words burn with spiritual fervor. Guiding a growing flock in an age of uncertainty, the bishop teaches charity, unity, and steadfastness. But Cyprian's newfound calling is tested almost immediately by the fires of adversity. It is a perilous time for the young church. Emperor Decius launches a brutal persecution of Christians, demanding public sacrifices to the empire's gods. Threats of torture and death hang in the hot African air. Cyprian, as bishop, must make a bitter choice. Stay in Carthage and face likely execution, or go into hiding to continue guiding his flock from the shadows. He chooses a strategic retreat. From a secret refuge, Cyprian pens letters to hearten the fearful and counsel the beleaguered clergy. Though absence earns him whispers of cowardice, his eyes are fixed on the long game, preserving the church through the tempest. And a tempest it is. Many Christians falter under duress, offering incense to Jupiter to save their lives. When the storm of persecution finally passes, Carthage's faith lies in disarray. Churches are riven by the question of how to treat those who lapsed. With gentle firmness, Bishop Cyprian works to mend the rift. He urges mercy for the repentant but insists on penance to temper justice with forgiveness. His leadership steers the community back toward unity, even as debates smolder. No sooner has peace been restored than a new scourge descends. A plague, lethal and unrelenting, sweeps through Carthage's streets. Panic and despair grip pagans and Christians alike as bodies pile high. Cyprian does not hide from this invisible enemy. Instead, he rallies the Christians to tend the sick and dying, no matter their faith. Day after day, they carry out the dead, nurse the afflicted, and feed the hungry. The bishop himself is seen on the front lines of compassion, offering comfort amid the plague's misery. To the astonished pagan world, this charity, even for strangers and persecutors, speaks louder than any sermon. Cyprian's example shines, a beacon of selfless love in a night of suffering. Yet darker nights still lie ahead for him. A few years later, Emperor Valerian renews the persecution of Christians, this time targeting their leaders. In 257 AD, soldiers seize Cyprian. The Bishop of Carthage refuses to flee again. His hour of witness has come. He is exiled to a distant city, but even there his spirit remains unbroken. On the first night in exile, it is said, Cyprian experiences a strange vision, a dream that he will soon die for his faith. If this prospect frightens him, he shows no sign. Instead, he writes to his church, strengthening them for the trials to come. as a general would encourage his troops before battle. The following year, Cyprian is summoned back to Carthage under guard. The final act of his drama is at hand. Authorities intend to make an example of this prominent bishop who defied the emperor's decree. They stage a public trial at a place called the Sexti Forum. It is a dry September day, 258 AD. Cyprian, dignified and serene, stands before the Roman governor. A crowd gathers under the merciless sun as the charges are read. Refusal to worship the pagan gods, obstinate leadership of an illegal sect. The verdict is never in doubt. Offered one last chance to save himself by renouncing his faith, Cyprian calmly declines. There is no fear in his voice, only resolve. The governor pronounces the death sentence. Cyprian will die by the sword. In that charged moment, a murmur runs through the onlookers, some horrified, some in awe of the bishop's composure. Cyprian's response is recorded for all time. "Thanks be to God," he says with a gentle bow of his head. Even the executioners pause, taken aback by the prisoner's tranquility. As soldiers lead him to the outskirts of the city, many from his flock follow weeping, but Cyprian has forbidden them from trying to rescue him. He kneels in prayer one last time. In a final gesture of grace, he removes his own cloak and blindfold and even gifts the executioner a gold coin, ensuring the man who is to kill him bears no ill will or financial worry. Then, in a single swift stroke, the blade falls. The bishop's head is severed, and with it, Carthage gains a martyr. Witnesses later gather his blood-soaked garments as holy relics, and the story of Saint Cyprian of Carthage, bishop, hero of charity, steadfast martyr, spreads across the Roman world. Thus ends the first tale of Cyprian. But even as the people of Carthage mourn their beloved saint, far to the east another tale of Cyprian is beginning to unfold. This second story takes us not to history's well-documented halls, but into the misty realm of legend. Travel now to the great city of Antioch in Syria, sometime later in the 3rd century. Here we meet a very different Cyprian, one whose youth is spent not in churches or schools of rhetoric, but in the secretive study of forbidden arts. Cyprian of Antioch, as he will later be known, is said to have been born to pagan parents who dedicated him as a child to the old gods. Hungry for knowledge and power, he journeys across the ancient world in pursuit of occult wisdom. In the temples of Greece, the crypts of Egypt, the high plateaus of Chaldea, the young man learns from sorcerers and priests of dark rites. By the time he returns to Antioch, Cyprian's name is whispered in fear and awe: master of magic, consorter with unclean spirits. In incense-choked chambers under the moonlight, he recites incantations to summon infernal forces. For Cyprian, the line between the mortal world and the demonic has become perilously thin. In Antioch also lives a Christian maiden named Justina, renowned for her beauty and her piety. By chance or destiny, her path crosses that of Cyprian when a wealthy nobleman approaches the sorcerer with a desperate plea. This suitor is hopelessly enamored of Justina, but she has spurned his advances, vowing to keep her chastity and faith for Christ alone. Frustrated and lovesick, the man seeks Cyprian's aid to bend Justina's will with magic. Such a task is but a trifle for the great magician of Antioch, or so Cyprian believes. For a hefty price in gold, he agrees to help. As midnight arrives, Cyprian begins his work. Calling on the powers he has courted for years, he conjures a demon and sends it to kindle lust in Justina's heart, to make her ache with love for the suitor. The demon slips unseen into the young woman's home, confident in its evil mission. Yet moments later it flees back to Cyprian in terror, scorched as if by fire. It babbles that it could not even approach Justina. She had made the sign of the cross and prayed, and a brilliant aura encircled her, repelling the fiend. Perplexed, Cyprian summons stronger entities, hurling one spell after another against this Christian girl. He tries enchantments under Venus's star, potions brewed with wolf's bane, even an illusion of spectral apparitions to haunt her. But nothing can breach the holy shield of Justina's faith. Each demon returns defeated, howling that an insufferable radiance wards the girl, some power they dare not name. For the first time in his life, Cyprian tastes the bitterness of failure. Night after night he exhausts his arsenal of sorcery, and night after night Justina thwarts him with a simple prayer on her lips. As dawn breaks after yet another fruitless attempt, Cyprian's pride crumbles. Rage and frustration swell within him, then falter, giving way to doubt and fear. How can this be? All the knowledge he gathered, the pacts he sealed in blood, the very prince of demons he once invoked, all powerless against a young woman's devotion to her God. Everything he has believed in, everything he has sacrificed for the sake of power, is now called into question. The foundations of his world quiver. Cyprian finds himself standing at a crossroads of destiny, his soul torn between darkness and light. One night, as a full moon peers through ragged clouds, Cyprian retreats to a grove outside the city. The scrolls of his magic lies scattered at his feet. Overwhelmed by desperation, he presses his face into his hands. In the silence, only the distant chirp of insects and his own heartbeat keep him company. Here is a man utterly defeated, not by an army or a rival sorcerer, but by the innocent prayers of a Christian girl. Cyprian recalls how the demons shrieked at the mere mention of Christ, the way an invisible force cast them out. A realization, like a shaft of lightning, splits his darkness. The God whom Justina serves must possess a power far greater than all of Cyprian's infernal allies. In a trembling voice, Cyprian whispers an experiment, a simple prayer to this Christian God, a name he has long spurned. He forms his fingers clumsily but sincerely into the sign of the cross, just as he saw Justina do. In that very instant, the oppressive weight of darkness that had hung about him for years is lifted. The night air seems to hum with newfound energy. The howling of distant demons falls abruptly silent, as if a horde of unseen foes has just recoiled in fear. Cyprian's heart pounds, but not with terror, with hope. The sorcerer rises to his feet, eyes turned upward to the stars he once worshipped in vain. Dawn finds Cyprian knocking at the door of the local church, seeking the bishop who had baptized Justina. Imagine the shock of the clergy. The city's infamous magician, cloaked in the same robes he used for rituals, now begging for sanctuary and salvation. Cyprian pours out his story in tears, his attempts to corrupt an innocent, the undeniable power of Christ that thwarted him, and his fervent desire to renounce the devil and be washed clean. It is a hard thing to trust the sudden penitence of one so steeped in evil. At first, the Christian clergy eye Cyprian with suspicion, fearing a trick. But Justina herself intervenes, urging them to give the man a chance. After all, it was her steadfast Lord who conquered him. And so Cyprian is received into the church. In a public spectacle, he brings forth his books of sorcery, tomes filled with secrets of astrology and demon summoning, and burns them in the sight of all, watching the smoke of his former life curl into the sky. Then, kneeling with head bowed, he accepts baptism, the water washing away the last stains of his occult past. The once proud mage emerges from the baptismal font as Cyprian the Penitent, a humble follower of the faith he once tried to destroy. His conversion sends ripples through Antioch. Many pagans, astonished by the news, follow his example and turn to the church, inspired that even a servant of darkness could be touched by the light. In the months and years that follow, Cyprian grows fervent in holiness. Like the Cyprian of Carthage before him, this Cyprian's talents soon find use in service of God. He studies scripture and learns quickly, his sharp mind now keen for divine truth. In time he is ordained a deacon, then a priest. Eventually, in a poetic twist of fate, the former sorcerer is elevated as Bishop of Antioch, at least according to later legend. Yes, a successor to the very bishop whom he once approached as a contrite sinner. By his side, the faithful Justina takes vows as a nun and later becomes abbess of a convent, dedicating her life to Christ and charity. It seems that Cyprian's story has become one of redemption and second chances, but fate has one final chapter to write in blood. The year is 304 AD. The Roman Empire is under the iron rule of Diocletian, and a fierce persecution against Christians rages, the last and one of the cruelest. Bishop Cyprian of Antioch and Abbess Justina are not spared. Secret police drag them from their flock and throw them into a dank prison. In the darkness, Cyprian and Justina comfort each other with prayers and psalms. They know well the stories of martyrs who have gone before. Indeed, Cyprian likely knows of his namesake from Carthage who met a similar fate decades prior. After harsh confinement, they are brought in chains to the imperial court at Nicomedia, where Diocletian himself is said to preside over their trial. The emperor has heard whispers of Cyprian, how this once great sorcerer betrayed the old gods. To Rome's rulers, a renegade magician turned Christian is a prize catch, a trophy to display in their campaign to stamp out the faith. Offered high honors and freedom if he will only sacrifice to Jupiter and renounce Christ, Cyprian refuses without hesitation. Justina, steadfast as ever, also remains resolute in her devotion. The enraged Diocletian orders them tortured. Roman executioners apply their cruelest arts, hoping to break the saintly pair. The rack, iron hooks, fire. But like the martyrs of old, Cyprian and Justina endure, sustained, they say, by a strength beyond this world. Not a cry of despair escapes Justina's lips. Not a word of recantation passes Cyprian's. Finally, the imperial court condemns them to death. On a cold morning, by the banks of the Gallus River, the two are led out to execution, bruised and bloodied but unbowed. In a scene that mirrors Cyprian of Carthage's end, the former sorcerer and the devoted virgin are beheaded by sword. Their heads fall, not as criminals defeated, but as victors who kept faith to the last breath. Later, compassionate Christians recover their bodies and carry them to Rome for honorable burial. Thus Saint Cyprian of Antioch and Saint Justina earn their crown of martyrdom, their names to be remembered in church calendars and pious legends through the ages. Two Cyprians, two distinct lives, two paths that never crossed in life. And yet, history and folklore would soon entwine them in death and memory. In the aftermath of these events, as the centuries rolled on, the lines between the Bishop of Carthage and the Magician of Antioch began to blur. Far from the lands where Cyprian and Justina met their end, scholars and storytellers sometimes stumbled in distinguishing them. The confusion began innocently. The name Cyprianus was not common, and the Church honored both men as martyrs. In time, some readers of martyrologies assumed they must be one and the same saint. Even learned men fell into the trap. By the 4th century, Saint Gregory of Nazianzus, a father of the Church, mentions Cyprian in his writings but seems to mix elements of the two stories, praising a Saint Cyprian who was both a bishop and a former sorcerer. The poet Prudentius, in his verses, does much the same, weaving the threads into one tapestry. The result was a kind of legendary fusion. An idea took root that there was only one Saint Cyprian, a mighty wizard who converted and became a holy bishop. It was a compelling narrative, after all. People love stories of dramatic transformation, and what transformation could be greater than a master of dark magic turning into a champion of the Church? And so, in sermons and folklore, many began to celebrate a single Saint Cyprian, patron of occult wisdom renounced and of steadfast faith embraced. As the Middle Ages dawned and advanced, this merged legend grew in the telling. Folk tales embroidered the accounts with ever more fantastical details. How Cyprian could command demons but dismiss them with a word once he found Christ. How he penned a great tome of all his sorceries only to use its knowledge to combat evil after his conversion. In monasteries and villages from Spain to Russia, the legend of Saint Cyprian the Mage Saint captured imaginations. Each culture added its own embellishments, further obscuring the historical truth that two different Cyprians had lived, believed, and died. By the time we reach the age of grimoires and witchcraft folklore, the idea of Cyprian as a singular figure was deeply entrenched. In Iberian countries especially, tales of São Cipriano took on a life of their own. He became a quasi-mythic persona, a saint to pray to for miracles, but also one whose name could be invoked in spells and enchantments. This curious duality gave birth to one of the most notorious books of magic ever to circulate in Europe, the Book of Saint Cyprian. Many versions of this book appeared between the 17th and 19th centuries, claiming to be the work of the saint himself, written before he renounced sorcery. These grimoires, filled with spells, demon conjurations, and charms, were all attributed pseudonymously to Cyprian. Of course, the real Cyprian of Carthage never practiced magic, and the real Cyprian of Antioch left no writings that we know of, let alone a manual of the dark arts. But that did not stop enterprising peddlers of magic from slapping the famous name Saint Cyprian on their texts to give them an air of forbidden authority. Peasants and even some learned occultists whispered that Saint Cyprian's book held the secrets to undo any hex, to summon treasure, or to win love. After all, who better to trust with such spells than a sorcerer-turned-saint who knew the devil's tricks but stood now at God's throne? The Church, for its part, often tried to clarify the confusion. In official martyrologies, Cyprian of Carthage was commemorated on one day, usually September 16th, often paired with his friend Pope Cornelius, whereas Cyprian of Antioch and Justina were commemorated on another, September 26th, the anniversary of their martyrdom under Diocletian. Medieval hagiographers occasionally pointed out that no bishop of Antioch named Cyprian appears in authentic records, hinting that the tale of the sorcerer might be more edifying fiction than fact. Nonetheless, the popular imagination rarely consults dry church records. To the common folk, Saint Cyprian was one enigmatic figure. Some prayed to him for protection, believing his experience with evil gave him special power over demons. Was it not said that demons once obeyed him? Surely, they reasoned, even now in heaven he could compel those same forces to depart from the afflicted. Thus, paradoxically, this saint became informally regarded as a patron of magicians and those afflicted by magic. In Portugal and Brazil, even into modern times, legends persisted of a single São Cipriano, whose prayers could break any curse and who, S.E. Book of Secrets, was eagerly sought by practitioners of folk magic. The two historical men named Cyprian had merged into a single larger-than-life character, the saint who had been a sorcerer. But now, at last, the light of historical truth falls upon the old map of our story, separating the strands that legend intertwined. The reality is clear. These were not the same person, despite the centuries of confusion that blended them. Saint Cyprian of Carthage and Cyprian of Antioch led entirely different lives, on opposite sides of the Roman world, their only true link being the shared faith for which they died. One was a real, flesh-and-blood bishop whose letters and deeds are preserved in church history. A man who started life in privilege, transformed into a courageous pastor, and made the ultimate sacrifice for his flock. The other, while honored as a martyr as well, walks the hazy borderland between fact and fable, a tale of darkness surrendered to light, meant to inspire the faithful to trust in God's power over evil. Their stories, distinct and complete in themselves, each offer profound lessons. But combined, they created a third story, a myth that captivated generations. Myths have their place, but there comes a time to discern truth from tale. And so we conclude our journey through this historical mystery. The air in our imaginary candlelit archive is heavy with the weight of all we've uncovered. We close the dusty tome that held both stories side by side, and as we do, the figures of Cyprian seem to stand apart from each other, each illuminated in his own right. We see Cyprian of Carthage, the steadfast bishop, quill in hand as he writes pastoral letters by lamplight, and we see Cyprian of Antioch, the sorcerer-turned-martyr, casting his grimoires into the flames. They are not the same man, but two men, two legends that took different paths to sainthood. One never knew the other, yet in the tapestry of human memory, their threads were tangled for ages. Now, with careful unraveling, each thread can be admired for its unique color and pattern. The next time someone speaks of Saint Cyprian who hexes and blesses in the same breath, you will know to pause and recall the truth. You will remember that behind that single name stand two silhouettes, one robed in bishop's garments, the other in the humble tunic of a penitent mage. Both faced the darkness, one from without, one from within, and both clung to the light. Saint and sorcerer, bishop and penitent, Cyprian and Cyprian. Not one soul, but two. Through the mists of time and the haze of folklore, their distinct faces emerge at last, and the long confusion fades like smoke. In the end, faith and history triumph over fantasy. The record is set right, and the legacy of each Cyprian shines free and undimmed, as a guiding star and a cautionary tale for generations to come.